Let me change this a little bit. Well, I appreciate you joining us today, Professor Race. So, some of our, here at ACS, some of our students are not haven't quite taken con law yet, and so they're kind of all over the chart. We have some 1Ls, 2Ls, 3Ls, 4Ls, and so obviously, being this is the American Constitution Society, a big nexus is con law, and you were my con law professor, and I think probably a few other people in here is con law professor. So we wanted to talk about con law today, and I'm sure there's a lot to talk about. Is that right?
Oh yes, oh yes. It's a very interesting time.
So I guess, when I started taking your course, we were kind of in the election season, didn't know how that was going to go. And then, obviously Trump won, and it didn't take quite long for things to go awry or to speed up. We've had lots of global tariff war, even against our allies. We've had mass firings of immigration judges. We've had mass resignations. We've had the USAID cut. We've had, so much stuff, and it kind of makes you wonder, and it's sort of our topic today, but it kind of makes you wonder, what is the limits of the executive, and also is the executive, it's supposed to be equal, right? Three branches. Is the executive really far ahead of the other two? That's the question. So what do you think?
I'm going to first share one screen with you,
Okay.
right? This is from the Federal Registry. Uh, Make sure I share the right thing. Hold on. uh, Hold on. There it is. Okay, share that. This you can get a list of his executive orders. This scroll, 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 right? And this is just January. I mean, just 2025. This doesn't even include 2026. These are the number of executive orders he has. So the question you have to get into is why in the world, or how can he actually do all of this? And the answer is we're not clear. In essence, if we start thinking about what we do, um, if, just this idea of how far he can go. Um, let's see, am I sharing my PowerPoint? Or am I sharing? Yeah. So that we get into the idea of first of how we got to where we are. And let's be honest, it started with this guy, George III. We didn't want any kings, right? So we actually, there were other reasons and all this other stuff. But in essence, when we won the revolution, we basically said no kings. And so we created a whole government with no kings. And all we had was a legislature and a head of the legislature. But then we realized that there's a problem, that you need somebody, individual, to represent, and also for military, for commerce. And so we wanted to have a president. And ultimately, that's what we did. But now we went from this to this. Now, this does not, and I don't want to make sure because I'm not, I just thought it was a funny picture, right? If I could have found a funny picture of Washington, I would have used that, right? Uh, you know, but the bottom line is we get to the situation as to how do we get to where we are. So we end up having to create a constitution because just having a legislature didn't work. But they still, and this is what everyone forgets, the strongest body is the legislature. That's why it was the first thing. And from the very beginning, it was thought to be the strongest. But the power of the president came in question because, so from where does he get his power? Well, there are really three main things. One, this statement in Article 2 of the Constitution, executive power shall be vested in the president of the United States. Notice what we don't have. a definition.
Professor, can you someone's asking if you could open the PowerPoint in full screen so they could see it a little better.
Oh, yes. If I can figure out how I'm supposed to do that.
I think you go to slideshow at the
Yeah.
top there, and then like you click to the right.
Oh,
Yeah,
slideshow.
slideshow,
Yes.
slideshow, and then from current slide. Yep. And then you can hit the space button
There
and
we
just,
go.
yep. All right.
Okay. And so basically the problem is this is the first part of Article 2, but they don't define what executive power is. And from that moment on, we've started wondering, what does it mean? But the other thing that you need to pay attention is look at the oath. I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of president, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, meaning that he will also uphold and execute the laws. Well, the president, the laws come from the Congress, and Congress has specific power. And then we get to this, the third part. President shall be commander in chief of the Army and Navy, and for our current principles, and of the militia of the several states when called into actual service of the United States. Now, when we talk about militia, what is the militia? That's our National Guard. So I know that some people believe that the purpose of the Second Amendment is to take up arms against the government. Well, that's actually not true. Second Amendment has never been a defense to treason. And the head of the militias, when called into service, is actually our president. So these are the three things that he gets his power. And if you notice, unlike Congress, which has specific powers they're given, a lot of these are these are inherent powers, not specific powers. Yes, he's given the power to pardon, only federal, but it's this idea of what does executive mean? What does it mean to be commander in chief? What does it mean that that your job is to execute the laws? So there's been this question of how far does his power go? And this has been a fundamental question. And it came to the head in this case, which Mr. Garan probably horrifically remembers, the Youngstown sheet.
I do remember.
Yeah. But the whole thing is that even in Youngstown sheet, they actually didn't tell you what executive power is. They actually gave you four theories of how, when he can use executive powers. And they're actually different from one another. One is that his power is at the highest when Congress, or specifically the Constitution, says, President, you can do this. So if Congress gives him the power to do it, then he absolutely can do it with his executive authority, right? Then we have this one. This is sort of in the middle. He acts in the absence of congressional grant, but he doesn't have to get permission from Congress, but Congress hasn't denied him the power. Now, he's relying solely on independent powers, but implicit in this is Congress can come in and deny him the power. And then the third one, and they say the three, is that he cannot do something that is in direct conflict with a power that belongs to somebody, to one of the other branches of government. So, for example, the president is not allowed to create a patent. That's not a power. It's a power specifically given to Congress. He is not allowed to do that, right? We call that usurpation. And actually, from con law, for some of your memories, that will be the separation of powers question. And then the last one is that he has inherent and emergency powers. Now, these are the powers that when the country's under attack, when we are, or when there's something important. And this part of this is related to him being commander in chief. And commander in chief means that he is the top general. And so when he's dealing with international affairs, he has a very, very strong power. Now, he can negotiate the treaty, but he cannot approve a treaty. Okay. He can, let me correct that. He cannot cause the treaty to come into being because he needs the Senate to do that. And the way that our government primarily works is designed to have both two branches of government working together in order to get things done. However, In an emergency, you don't want to have two branches. You want to be able to do things quickly. This actually goes back to Rome. The whole concept of a dictator was a position created by Rome. When they were under stress, they would appoint someone dictator during that stress who would be able to command all forces to defend Rome. And that's where that term came from. It was actually an elected position. And since that time, when you look at democracies, you'll find that most dictators were elected. I know some Venezuelans say something about this, but Chavez in Venezuela was actually elected first. Putin was elected. Hitler was elected. Mussolini was invited into the government. It's not a surprise that a lot of the democracies that have gone away went away because they elected the people to take it away. Now, so here's the thing: there are a couple of things, and I'm getting to a couple of things that Trump has done specifically. That there are a few that he's done that automatically they've said no, and I actually had to teach this for the first time because no one had conceived that this is a possibility. There's a concept called empowerment. The president does not control the money. The money is controlled by Congress. They allocate the money. It's the president's job to spend the money the way Congress says it. Well, back in the 1970s, Nixon wanted to do some other stuff, so he was taking money and using it for other things, and they said, you cannot do that. You cannot impound the money and use it for whatever you want. And the reason you didn't find that in any of your constitutional law books is because since the early 1970s, no one would conceive that any president would try to do it until Trump tried to do it, whichever one of his executive orders. He basically said, mine, my money, I get to spend it the way I want. And it's not. It's one of the few things that they said you cannot do, right? I will say what this gets to is the whole thing of he has power to do things, but there's actually power within the Constitution to stop him in virtually everything he's doing. And in history, I will tell you that has come up, that when the president has gone too far, it's the other branches of government whose duty it is to stop him. And so when we're talking about this expansive power of the president, it's not the president that's at fault. It's Congress and the Supreme Court that is failing. A bully will always take more until someone steps up and stops the bully. And I'm not saying Trump is a bully. I'm not going to overtly say that. But I am going to say that the reason that his power is expansive is because the powers that are in control of the Congress and of the courts are letting him be. So, for example, when you have, and this should be a teenager, there's a way to do it. If a teenager says he's running away, then, oh, okay, parent gives him money. Go run away. Now, that's not the way that my father worked. This is how my father worked. I'm running away. Great. Take everything you own, and I bought those clothes. Translation, right? My money, not yours. This is Congress's money, not the president's. If Congress wants to stop the president, then exert your power. So let's look at it. So think about some of the things he's done, right? And I'm going to stop the PowerPoint for a little bit so I can talk to you guys, right? When you look at some of the things that he's done, it's not the problem. It's not that he's tried to do them. Because there are a couple of things. For example, one of the things, and I don't know how many have had constitutional law. Hey, my wife's on the phone. I know she hasn't, right? Although she's heard me a lot. the one of the things that you will see that the president is the head of the executive branch, which means he gets to control all of the executive, agencies. But most agencies are actually created by Congress and they're not completely executive. They allow him to appoint an executive head, but the body is legislative. And so the rule was, and for years this was the case, it was called the spoil system. New president comes in, everybody gets fired, and then he gets to put in whoever he wants in any positions. And the advantage of that was that, he could do favors. Well, turns out that is a very poor way to run a bureaucracy, which we are. And the reason is because if you always bringing in people new, then you have no institutional knowledge. And so what you really need are experts. And so the bottom line is Congress passed the law. The president can fire any head of an executive organization. Let me correct that. He can fire most heads of an executive organization. Attorney General, I don't like the Attorney General, bam. Basically, anybody he appoints, he can fire. Right. But Congress may step in and say there's certain people you cannot fire. This is the civil service. So one of the things that Trump first did, he came in and he just said, we're firing all these people. Well, for 70 years, you could not do that. That was actually, Congress had passed laws that say you cannot fire people except for cause. And so it was challenged in court. And you notice what happened. He fired a bunch of people, and then it went to court, and the local judges said, no, you cannot do that. You cannot fire. And they made laws for the they made rulings for the entire government and everybody he fired. Well, it worked its way up to the Supreme Court. Let me correct that. It jumped its way to the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court started taking cases without making it go through all the appellate cases and off season. And then they were making what we call the shadow docket. And so they were making rulings without saying why they had the rulings. And so one of the things they essentially said was, well, first off, local district courts can only rule for their district. They cannot rule for the entire country. Well, that means that he can fire people, but only in the district. Everybody would have to bring their own case, which, of course, is an expensive way to do things. Now, Sotomayor then stepped in and said, wait a minute. Or it may have been Kagan and said, you can do class actions. So we're waiting for the bunch of class actions. But what it did is it allowed him to overcome 70 years of jurisprudence temporarily in order to fire a bunch of people. Then there were specific agencies that they didn't want political. They wanted them outside of the political process, which says you cannot fire these people. One of those was the Consumer Protection Agency. And the other one is the Jerome Powell and the and he wanted to get, because look, this is the thing. Hey, this is not a surprise. Our governor does it. Our governors have done this. I want to have my own people in, so I want to get rid of everybody that's was appointed by previous people, right? In fact, I think the Democrats just won a state seat, even though it was in a Trump district. It had been a Democratic district, and they were expecting a Republican to take it over, but a Democrat won because of the times. But the way Landry got rid of that person, because you can't fire a state house member, is he appointed him to a board so that it would be an open seat. He also changed the president of different colleges, so then he can actually he wanted a conservative member of the Supreme Court, so he appointed a guy on the Supreme Court to be the head of Northwestern. Therefore, he got to replace him. And hey, that's all within the proper gamut. But what Trump is doing in firing these people and trying to fire Jerome Powell, and I can't remember the African-American woman's name that's on the Federal Reserve, is he just wants to get his own people so that they can make what is short-term decisions. The whole point of the board, though, is to not make short-term decisions, but to make long-term decisions. And while the Supreme Court sort of hemmed and hawed, and they still at least have upheld thus far saying you cannot fire these specific agencies. So when I tell you about executive excess, what I'm really saying is that the bigger problem is not the president doing it, because it's not a surprise that he tries it. It's the fact that Congress has not stepped in. So, for example, Johnson, Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson was impeached because he actually vetoed a law passed by the radical Republicans. Nixon resigned not because he had been impeached. He knew that was going to happen because three people, three Republicans came in, and I can't remember the name. One of them was Barry Goldwater. I think one was Howard Baker, and there was another. Came to him and said, "We, Nixon, because you were involved in the cover-up." They didn't even know he was involved in the crime at the beginning. Just because he was involved in the cover-up, they said, "You will be impeached." Obama told incoming members of the legislature when he was president, find something that is so important you're willing to lose your position for. If you're going to be a member of the House or Senate, there has to be some standard that you're willing. And the point is every senator also says they're going to uphold the Constitution. And if you understood what happened in the 70s and 80s under Carter and under Reagan and under Bush was pretty good with, and Clinton was pretty good with it, but under Carter, the legislature, the Congress, the Senate basically said, yes, you are the president. We support you, but we are an institution. We're going to support our institution. And what you're finding is that right now we don't have those people of courage. We have people who are primarily doing stuff that is based upon their politics. And so they're supporting the president, but every time you are losing, look, my father once said this, made this statement. He said, if there is power in a position, use the power or lose the power. And you don't compromise your standards based upon the fact that the guy is doing something that you like. A dictator doing what I like is still a dictator. And I'm not saying Trump's a dictator.
So,
Right.
Dr. Race,
Go
let
ahead.
me ask you a quick question on Congress. So obviously, I've kind of been under the impression for the last 5 years that the House of Representatives is a zoo. It's crazy. The Senate is the more put together chamber, cameral, and but now we do start we're starting to see that both Republican Senate, Republican House are very, very, very complicit with whatever Trump wants. And you have a couple, and I mean a very small, I mean Thomas Massey is one I could think of, maybe Rand Paul, but these sort of
Tom Tillis.
libertarian
Yeah.
Republicans that are sort of taking a stand. But as far as I'm aware, and I didn't know this, a friend of mine told me who actually got a master's degree in legislative affairs. It's like a science, some of these rules for legislative policy and how the House runs, that the Speaker of the House sets a lot of rules. One of them could be am I going to let you just bring a bill out on the floor? And apparently for Mike Johnson, the answer is no. Maybe in the past it was yes. That's why Thomas Massey did something that I did not know existed called a discharge petition to sort of force these Epstein files to be released. But, if you are a single Republican or a single Democrat trying to break from your party on an issue, there could be serious ramifications, but also it
Yeah.
might simply not be possible either. So how much influence do these speakers have over?
Oh, the speakers are actually not as strong as they used to be. Oh yeah, Tip O'Neill was one of the strongest speakers in the world, Sam. Yeah. So no, they're not nearly as strong as they used to be. They're very weak, and it's because a small number can massively affect whether you speak or not because it's too much of a divided thing. But remember, it's designed so that the members of the House are to respond to much more to respond to the will of people. That's why they are elected every 2 years. The House is not my issue. My primary issue is the Senate. The whole point of the Senate is that they're supposed to be the more deliberative body. They only get elected every 6 years, which means they got 4 years, 2 years to learn, 2 years to do what should be done, and then 2 years to run. That's the way it should be. But you have them that are they are being very political. I'll give a perfect example. Uh, um, what's the name of the man that was just killed by ICE?
Oh, Alex Pretty.
Yeah, Pret. Here's my Pretty. Here's my question. Where are all these senators that said that you should be able to carry a gun? I have not heard a word from them. They've talked about everyone should be able to carry a gun, although every time they say everyone should be carrying a gun, they do not mean there's certain people they don't think should be able to carry a gun. I can't remember the black woman that was shot in the house, and they said because he had a gun, but he was in his house and he was entitled to a gun, and they go in and shoot her. He had a right to a gun. No, I didn't hear anybody say he had a right to a gun. You have Freddie, who has a right to carry a gun. You had senators who said well, everyone should have it. They actually have legislation to say that regardless of the state, if one state says that you can conceal carry, you can. This is coming up right now. You should be able to conceal carry in every state, regardless of those state laws. But I didn't hear most of these people supporting that say anything about Freddie. I didn't hear any of most of them say anything when Janine Perro said, if you bring a gun into Washington, D.C., then you're going to get killed. And what you're seeing is that what we've lost is the deliberative body, the people that are more protected. The Senate are just quiet. See, Tom Tillis is speaking out, North Carolina. Well, that's because he did something. He angered Trump. Yeah, Breonna Taylor. Thank you. uh, Tom Tillis is speaking out, but he's speaking out because Trump turned against him, and so that he started running somebody against her. So he said, "Forget it. I'm not going to run anymore." So okay, so only now are you saying what you really believe?
Yeah, even the NRA made a statement, kind of in support of Preddy, and I think it shocked a lot of Republicans. They said, "Hey, we like this. We like, the idea of that having a gun, and we like, protecting that, and we don't like what's happening now." And a lot of people were kind of taken aback by that, certainly.
Hey, my question about that is where have you been for the last 15, 20 years with the number of, and I'm gonna say this, African Americans who basically they were shot and they say they had a gun. I can't remember the name of the 11-year-old. He was shot within 10 seconds playing with a toy gun in a sandbox. Yeah, Tamir Rice. I appreciate that, Mr. Jackson. Right. So, and so now you have this whole concept of how far is he going to take it. Now, there are a couple of things I think he may have overstepped, right? One of those is taking the Georgia election boxes. Because see, here's the thing, and this all plays a role, and it actually goes back to Alito. Alito is very supportive of what the president is doing. So he's essentially the whole point is we're getting rid of affirmative action. Look, and so essentially affirmative action is gone, right? And the group that's going to be affected most by getting rid of quote unquote DEI are women, which is not a surprise. Women were the biggest beneficiary of the 60s. So it's not a surprise that programs that support women, there are a lot of scholarships, things like that. Those are all basically going away because those are called DEI, right? And so as we the idea is Alito says, if the government says that this is the reason, why don't we just accept what they tell us? Well, I'm going, wait a minute. Then is that going to be true? For those of you who don't know, there's a very important case that you will learn called Lopez, right? And Lopez is the fundamental case right now of the Commerce Clause. Well, in Lopez, they said the possession of guns was economic. Well, if you follow Alito's argument, if the government says it's economic, why don't we accept it? Well, they won't accept it because they don't want it. So they are being very selective in how they're saying what government things that we will accept. They're doing it based upon their politics, not based upon some standard. So as I say that there is a problem with Congress not stepping up and doing their job, I'm also saying there's a problem with the Supreme Court not stepping up and doing their job. So and that they're making political decisions and they're using a, I'm as Mr. Garan would tell you, I am a history buff. I am not a historian, which means I have a font of massive amount of knowledge that is primarily useless that occasionally comes into play, right? That I will say in class. So, and I have a lot of, of that type of knowledge. But I also know that history is not fungible, that you can't just pick and choose what you want to make a decision. And right now we have a couple of Supreme Court justices that say it's historical, but they picking and choosing what history they want. And sadly, we now change it because the primary things that bother me about what's going on are, one, the selective DEI enforcement, which translation means if it's black, it's bad. We cannot make United States look bad about its past. We cannot have anything in the past. It's better to lie about the past than for people to understand. They just took away, for example, Medgar Evers' home, which is on the National Registry, right? They just took away the fact that, the person that shot him was a member of the White Citizens Council that was a racist cop. I can't say that he was racist. They just took away the fact that he was found, that his children and family found him in his own blood. Cannot say that, right? They took away the fact that that in not in Normandy, but in, I think it was Belgium or Netherlands, they took away black soldiers that died in that died in World War II, that were being supported and by local people in the Netherlands because of the sacrifice they made. Nope, took away that. Right. The whole point is that we want to lie about our history. And that's so, that's not new, but it is detrimental to our future. So between that, in terms of executive actions, between the firing of civil service, where Congress should step up and say, you can't do this, Trump, right? And between the dismantling of the whole Pax Americana after World War II, where we believe that isolationism should be the point. I disagree with it. Now, my disagreeing with that does not mean he can't do it. Because with international affairs, he is the commander in chief. If he wants to send troops into Venezuela, he can send troops into Venezuela. If he wants to send troops into Greenland, he is the chief general. He can do that.
So, Professor, I want to talk about something off of that topic. I'm glad you brought that up. So, and I talked earlier about how we've dismantled USAID.
Yes.
So, in some of these countries, and I've been to them and I love to travel, and we've talked about this, but we are the shining light on a hill to some of these nations. I mean, there is a country, I don't remember if it was Albania, but there's a road named after Bill Clinton. I remember when I was in Georgia, there was a highway named after George W. Bush. I mean, we are beloved in some of these places. Conversely, we're hated in some other places, and in which we've used influence, soft influence, hard influence to usurp power in these nations, to overthrow governments in Latin America, to wage war in places like Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria. So, these decisions are very important. Our reputation on the international arena, our reputation in other countries, whether we're reviled or admired. And I think most Americans, they may not care, they may not travel a lot to see that reaction. But I wondered if they did, and Americans started realizing, wow, the United States is doing a lot of stuff on our behalf. I wonder if we would move in some aspects, maybe not fully, but in some aspects, to more of a direct democracy, whereas we're voting, like, for example, I think in Switzerland, in Thailand, sorry, in Taiwan, we're voting for these serious foreign affairs policies. We're voting to, approve this mission. We're voting. Now, I understand that slows down the executive
Yeah.
and that, hurts operational readiness and all that stuff. But when American people are paying for something and it's affecting their reputation and credibility, I kind of think they have a right to say yes or no, right?
Oh, well, remember, we are a representative democracy, and we work through our representatives and members of the Senate. And the reality is they control all the money. They control the money. Therefore, they have influence, right? I mean, Trump, we passed the War Powers Act, which says before you put our troops in harm's way, you need to consult Congress. They didn't consult Congress before they sent troops into Venezuela. And all they had to do, you don't have to call all of Congress. All you had to do was notify the majority leader, notify the member of the House, and the minority leader of both parties. Traditionally, that is what's been done, right? They didn't do it. Now, it's up to Congress to step in and say, you didn't do this, we're cutting the money. Here's the secret. Congress never cuts the money. They never look, we're going to support the troops. Right. So they never cut the money. So, and I can tell you from my Constitution Law final in 1996, I was asked on my one, how was the War Powers Act unconstitutional? And it probably is. Because who are you to limit what the chief general does? Congress Congress doesn't have it. They have the power of the purse. He's the chief general. Therefore, most people are one issue or short term, are short term voters. I admit that I'm not a short term voter. I think long term. Everything I know, when I don't vote for someone I like. I've never gotten to this point where, and I'm an independent. I'm gonna tell you up front, I am not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I've been an independent for over 40 years. Uh, I don't vote based upon, my short term beliefs. I vote based upon, and I don't vote because I like this person. I vote for who can harm me and harm my children and my children's children. And that's always been the way I looked at things. So therefore, if there's somebody support that loses in the primary, it doesn't matter. I'm going to vote for I'm not going to get mad at the person that beats them. I may not, I may get irritated, but the decision is always going to be who can harm me and the country. And that's how I make my decisions. So, and that's not the way a lot of people are. I'm taking my ball and go home. I'm sorry, that's just not the way, because you can take your ball and go home, but you live in the United States. So you're still going to have people who are the ones who putting air or not in that ball, or even saying that you have a court to play on. Right? So that doesn't make sense. So now, so when we get to international affairs, though, you need to understand. Remember, under the Young Constitution, great deference is given to the president in dealing with international affairs. So, United States has always been, not always, but since World War II, we have been the world leader in power, and we work through our allies. And and why every senator hasn't come out and said it's stupid to attack Greenland? Because if you attack Greenland, then we lose Denmark. Denmark is right at one of the most critical areas for Russia, Navy going past Denmark. Why would we lose that for something that we already have bases in Greenland? So why does he want Greenland? Ask yourself, guys, and I'm asking you, why does he want Greenland? I'm
I
actually
think,
asking you guys.
yeah, I think there, and I'll love to let somebody else answer, but I think we're really testing the limits of our friendships with our greatest allies right now, and that's certainly very, especially in Canada. Canada just basically gave a middle finger to us, said we're going to start working with China. So it's.
Well, again, but Trump is not a long-term planner. By the way, what MBA does he have? Where did he get his MBA?
He doesn't.
He doesn't have an MBA. No.
He'll tell you,
It,
Warden.
yes, he went to Wharton, undergrad, majored in economics. And I admit it. Look. I would be mean. If I was a reporter, every time he said something negative about somebody, I would. There are two things I would probably say. One, I would just say Epstein. I mean, he's mentioned more than anybody else in Epstein, and they didn't show us the worst thing. So, or I would say, Obama's always been more popular than you. But that's me because I'm not. I don't have to keep that job as a reporter.
And Dr. Race, I don't know if you saw, I was just in the Pentagon. I did a tour there. Very cool. Would suggest it if anyone hasn't done it. But they gave the most onerous media policy to these the Pentagon reporters. Or some of them have offices in the Pentagon, Fox, CNN, and they said, you're not to report on anything that we don't approve. You're not to report on anything classified, and so it would take all of their real media reach away. So a lot of them, even Fox, said we're not doing this, and they're out. So it's war on them too.
It is, and here's the thing: what you do is that the president's always had that power as the head of the executive. The difference is that no president did it because the consequences of it were so bad. But when you have your own station, right? You have your own station that will kowtow and do whatever you want, regardless of the facts, right? And it's a categorical issue. If you believe that the other side lies, so I'm going to intentionally lie, then that is a problem because then you have nobody that believes in truth anywhere. So then people only listen to the side that they agree with. You all are going to be lawyers. What's the most important thing about being a lawyer? Understanding the strength and argument on the other side. How many of you saw the movie 8 Mile? Who do any of you have any of you seen the movie 8 Mile? Okay, Mr. Jackson, I'm going to put you on the spot. How did Eminem win his rap battle?
He was better.
No.
I don't.
Think
It's
of it
been
from a
forever
think
since
of it from
I've
a
seen.
lawyer standpoint.
It's been forever since I've seen Eight
Uh,
Mile.
do you remember what he did? He actually took every argument that the other side had and said it himself. So then the other side had nothing to say, including the negative about himself. He did to all the negative about himself. He did it and then minimized it, which meant
Hmm.
what is the other side going to say?
Right.
By the way, lawyers, if you got a negative for your side, don't let the other side bring it up.
Bring
If
it up first.
you, yeah, if you are prosecuting OJ and you know that you have a racist cop on your side, don't let the defense bring it up. You bring it up. So you diminish the power of it. It's the exact same thing. Now, my wife, she's a champion debater. She's not going to say anything. I know my wife, right? She's known this since, you know, the 11th grade. Champion debater, national debater, right? It's the same thing, guys. You need to know the strengths and weaknesses of the other side so that you can be prepared for everything that's going to go on. When you have someone like Trump, you need to understand what his motivations are. Trump Trump is short term. He just wants his name out. In fact, if he took Green, he wants to say, I brought in land. which he had said, sort of suggested in his, when he was president the first time. He wants to just say, I brought Greenland. I increased the size of the United States. He would even say the name. Remember, do you know what he said in terms? Remember what he said at the beginning about impoundment, right? What happened to the tunnel, the new tunnel that was supposed to be between New York and New Jersey? New tunnel, money's already allocated. Congress passed money. We're giving you money. Trump impounds the money and says, I'm not doing it, but unless you name the train station and I think it was train station and the new tunnel after me. Yeah, Gulf of America.
Gulf of America. And the
Yeah.
Trump Kennedy Center.
Trump Kennedy, which by the way, again, he can't do. So he put it up there, but officially he can't do that. Only Congress can do that. So Congress, where are you? Go ahead, Mr. Jackson.
I was going to say, I believe a district court judge blocked him and told him he couldn't withhold the funds for that tunnel.
Yes, they did. They just made that announcement. Yes.
Yes, sir.
However, it may go up to the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court, what the Supreme Court's been doing in their shadow docket is say, well, we're not ruling on it now, but we think he might win in the future, so we'll let him do it, but without giving a reason. But if it lasts too long and a new president comes in, I have no belief or faith that they would do that with a new president.
So, Professor, I have maybe one, maybe two more quick questions,
Okay.
and then maybe some other people can ask. So my first question is, are we going to be able as a nation to quickly bounce back when there's no more Trump? When the next guy comes, whoever it may be, maybe Marco Rubio wins, maybe Gavin Newsom wins, we'll see. But if we switch parties here and we have a Democrat president, will we be able to repair our image domestically, internationally? I'm hearing the answer is probably yes. We did it after Bush. We could do it again.
Yeah, but Bush,
will it be possible?
Yeah, but Bush was not nearly as extreme.
That's right. Yeah, internationally, maybe.
I mean, look, I'm not a fan of. I like Bush 1. I'll tell you, I like Bush 1 because I consider Bush 1 a pragmatist, and I like pragmatists as presidents. Have your beliefs, but then, hey, look at what's going on. You make a decision based upon what's going on, not based upon some ideology. Bush 2, I thought, was an ideologue, right? And so I'm going, regardless of everything else, this is what I'm going to do. The other thing I'm going to tell you that I have learned, and even though I'm an independent, you're going to say, if you look at the group that has increased the deficit the most, the 3 biggest deficit increases have occurred under Trump, Bush 2, and Reagan. The biggest increases, percentage increase. Right. It went up under all of them, though. Right. All of them have increased it. But the biggest increases have occurred under those presidencies. So, I'm a fan of not looking at the rhetoric and looking at the reality. That's one thing. All right. The second thing I will tell you is that it wasn't Caesar who ended the Roman Republic. It was Augustus, the next person. It's a question of what happens with the next person. Right? Because if you have the same situation where you have someone who is going too far and you have a legislature that refuses to stand up, that's when it's most at risk. All right. And so that scares me more than anything else. Right.
And, yeah.
But here's the thing. I don't understand the Democrats right now at all. So, I mean, my big question is, the instant you lost in 2024, you should have been registering people to vote. You're marching about ICE, you're marching about all this other stuff, but I don't see you out there registering anybody to vote. Let me tell you something, I'm a 70s child. I landed with the mothership connection. Some of you know what I'm talking about. I had hip hugger and bell bottom jeans. I'm not a child of the 60s. I'm actually right after that. I am the product of all the sacrifices that people made, right? And my older sister, probably one of the first to integrate schools. That being said, I know people who went through it, right, directly. And what I'm saying is that we could easily go back. We are headed back to the 1950s. Easily. right? So I apologize for that. That's telling me my medicine's ready.
So the last question I have is, and if anyone else has questions, I'd love we'll stay 10, 20 more minutes and talk. And I appreciate you coming, Dr. Race. It's always great, and I'm glad your wife is here. I know you've always mentioned her in the best light, even better than your own. So much better.
I married a brilliant woman. I am a blessed man.
That's fantastic. Yes, yes, yes. And so I want to talk about tariffs, and we could talk about this for probably about 3 weeks. But so we're actually hearing that the Supreme Court is likely to say that the tariffs in this policy are a no-go, right? And
Yes.
even that some of the money might need to be refunded or returned. Now, I'm told by some folks who keep up with Supreme Court politics that the administration is likely going to raise the issue of hardship. Hey, look, we're not going to be able to do that, and logistics are hard, and how do you expect us to do such a thing? So I guess the question is, number one, is the Supreme Court going to shock us on this? And number two, are they really going to send money back? I mean, I feel like that'd be such an embarrassment to the administration if they had to give all the money they won back, right? I mean, that's crazy.
No and no. Uh, because the tariffs, you're not going to, basically, it's a tax. So who's going to remember? You sue because of a tax? That's the generalized grievances. Remember, for those of you who are now doing your justice stability, who can bring a lawsuit about it? It's just a tax, right? And so we're taxing for the general welfare. So I don't see them giving money back. It's like I don't like wasting time on things that make no sense to me. So reparations. Yes, I'm an African American, historically bad. Do I believe they're ever going to have reparations? No. So there are too many other things that can be dealt with that can happen than me fighting over something that is never going to happen, right? You know, uh, and in terms of tariffs, what I think is going to happen is they're going to actually finally say that, look, tariff policies, and he's not the first to do tariff. Remember, Biden did some tariff, right? It's not a surprise. But the broad tariff policies, I think they're going to say that you need congressional approval for, right? And so Trump, but you gotta understand, Trump is a and he's probably a billionaire now. I don't think he was a billionaire, by the way, when he was elected in 2016. I don't believe he was a billionaire at all. He just, he was wealthy, right? But he's a great, what used to be known as a flim flam man. So he definitely making money. And matter by the way, I just saw Trump investments. They were doing this it was a nice looking commercial. Kids, invest get your kids to invest early, but I think they call it was like Trump dollars or something for people to invest, for kids to invest in. And I'm going, oh my goodness, there's no way I think he'll pay out on that, right? You know, but
I
um,
missed that one.
oh yeah, it was right at the beginning, right before the Super Bowl started.
I heard about the White House MMA fight, but I didn't hear about that
Yeah.
one.
So,
How
but
Mr.
no,
McCurry saw it.
but you gotta understand, Trump is a brinksmanship guy because Trump is not long term. He doesn't think long term. Trump only thinks short term. So I'm willing to risk everything because I don't care about what might happen long term. I just want some stuff in my name. So what I think is going to happen is that they're going to say, no, you cannot do the tariffs. But no, there's no way I think that the money's going to come back. They actually kind of made that same decision with Obergefell. Remember, Obergefell was challenged. Obergefell is the gay marriage case in which they said, well, we can't overturn it because it may be a little bit too much, right? It'll be too much. It'll be too harmful. Sort of that same argument to people who are already married. So what I expect, and I expect uh, Mr. Stephen Candy, and I am going to say this is my bias is saying that I shouldn't use, but Mr. Stephen Candy Thomas, you guys know who Stephen Candy was, right? You don't know who Stephen Candy was? Did you ever see the movie Django? And
Uh,
Django, What do you think Stephen's last name was? Played by Samuel L. Jackson. His last name was Candy. So when I talk about Clarence Thomas, he's Stephen Candy. I don't like using the word Uncle Tom because people don't know what Uncle Tom is. You know, they throw those words around, have no concept of what is an Uncle Tom. So don't use that word, guys. You don't know what you're talking about, right? In history, most of them. But Stephen Candy, you know who that is. Well, but Thomas is inviting people to actually bring up cases to overturn Obergefell, and basically, for those who use Chemerinsky, anything that's in chapter 8 of Chemerinsky, he wants it overturned. So, but I don't think they're going to give the money back to terrorists because I don't even think that the Supreme Court is going to bring up giving the money back. They just say, hey, you can't do this in the future. So, yes, sir, Mr. Jackson.
So I have a question about, I like that you brought up the emergency docket or shadow docket. So looking at the history or the recent history you had during Bush 2 and Obama during their presidencies, 16 years combined, the Supreme Court only granted 8 emergency docket hearings. Trump's first term, I believe it was like 28. And this is according to Brennan Center. Since January 20th, they have granted 28 grants of emergency hearings. What do you think about that? And where do you say the Supreme Court is going? And also, would it be fair to say that one could argue that the Supreme Court is essentially just becoming a branch of the executive, or is that too much?
No, no, it's not a branch of the executive. But the most important thing you should consider anytime you vote for president is the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, the control over the Supreme Court between liberals and conservatives was on the 2016 election. And there were only 2 people who could win. It was either going to be Hillary Clinton or it's going to be Donald Trump. So if you didn't vote or you voted for a third party, you saying that there was no difference between the two, and history has proven that, and I'm going to step on some toes, that you were an idiot. To say that, because there was a difference between, I don't care whether you like Hillary Clinton or not, it had nothing to do with it. Control of the Supreme Court went over to the basically the Supreme Court has been dominated by Republicans since for about 40 years. There've been more Republicans on the Supreme Court, but they never had the super majority in terms of the conservative philosophy. They have a super majority, and the last thing you want is in the next 2 years to lose Thomas off of the court or to lose Alito in the next 2 years. Because if that happens, then they're going to put another 45-year-old person in that's going to be on the court for another 30 years. That's going to be a conservative ideologue. So in terms of the docket, Mr. Jackson, have you had con law?
No, sir.
Okay. There was a period of time between 1890 and 1937 called the Lochner era, in which there was a belief, get out of the way of business. Let business do the business of America's business. If we get out of the way, America will be great. That means that Congress is not allowed to do child labor laws, any protection laws. They could not do anything that would limit business, right? They also limited the states because the states cannot interfere with the right of an individual to contract, so therefore states could not interfere. Well, that is a great plan. Let business do what they want, and then you end up with a Great Depression. So in response to the Great Depression, there was a change in the courts in which they said, no, we will allow the government to be much more active in regulating business. And I admit, I am a capitalist. I do not believe in communism. I think it's a stupid ideology, goes against personal. But I believe in a regulated capitalism model with some social programs. That's my standard, personally, right? So I actually understand that after, once the New Deal came in and you started putting in all these programs to help people, that you have Supreme Court that hates that and would like to go back to this point where you have a limited federal government, you have a state government can do what they want as long as it doesn't interfere with their view of what they want. And that's what the shadow docket has been doing, right? So we're going to allow Trump to do anything to get to the philosophical point we want, which is to limit the size of the federal government, limit the interference of the federal government with business, private enterprise. And they're doing that. And my problem was not their conservative beliefs on it, although I disagree with some of it. It's the fact that you're making decisions without giving guidance to any of the lower courts. That's why I have a problem with the shadow docket. You have laws in place. For example, you cannot fire anybody because of civil service. That's been a law. Why are you overturning that in the shadow docket without explaining to the court and lower courts how and why and how they could, what standard they should use? Right? It's because they want him to be able to fire people. Well, that doesn't make sense. Don't do that. Go through the appellate courts, do the way it's supposed to do, go through the arguments, and then have a standard that can be followed. I have a significant problem with the shadow docket because they basically are making political decisions, not making, what I think are reasoned legal decisions. So, does that answer your question?
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Race.
All right. Anybody else?
Sure, we've got some good
I have a
questions.
question, Dr. Race.
Go ahead.
Whenever you said that the Supreme Court's decisions are sending us back to the 50s, that really startled me, especially after recently reading the Dobbs decision. I was so upset by that decision that I actually went back and watched the Supreme Court oral arguments on it. But for me, as a African American soon to be lawyer, female,
Hey.
what would that look like, at this point in time?
Oh, okay. Yes, that's a good thing because here's the thing. The Dobbs decision was completely predictable based upon what was going on. You know what's going to happen. In fact, if you took con law from me 3 years ago, I used to have them, okay, guys, abortion's overturned. It's now every state's decision. You as a politician have to decide what the law is going to be. It was completely predictable, right? Abortion occurred Roe v. Wade occurred in 1973. And if I can teach you one thing, you need to understand the concept of incrementalism. That your job, is to change things incrementally. Yes, you want big changes, but you won't get big changes. Right now, what you see in the Supreme Court is they're trying to make as many big changes as possible as quick as they can because they worry that they're not, going to be able to take the time to make smaller decisions. And if they can get the big decisions through, then it's going to take a long time to get rid of it. It took 58 years to get rid of, separate but equal. So this is what you see. What I think that we're going to go back to, and you can see it being predicted with the religion decisions. I have my religious beliefs. My religious beliefs is, especially if I'm controlling the business, trump yours as an employee or as a person that deals with, or as a person that has to deal with me. So if my religious beliefs say that I don't believe I should serve African Americans, we don't serve African Americans, right? And it was, that's where I think we're headed. I don't think we're going to head back to where the government is involved the way it used to be, because the 50s was a combination not just of the state, not just of the state denying, minorities. It was also the private sector denying African Americans. And you need to understand, Brown versus Board of Education got rid of separate but equal. However, it did not get rid of Jim Crow. Right. When Charlie Kirk was killed, I told everyone that I do not believe that you ever escalate words to physical. I don't care what is said. I don't care what is done. There's no reason ever to respond to words with something physical. Right. Will Smith. You don't do that. It's never. And if you have a good enough vocabulary, you will respond to words with words. Right? That's what you're supposed to do. That being said, yeah, I disagree with Charlie Kirk because Charlie Kirk said that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 never should have been passed. it was it was the 1964 Civil Rights Act that said you may not discriminate in commerce against people of race, gender, and a couple, religion and some other things. That's actually what ended Jim Crow. So if you say that it never should have been passed, then you're saying we should still have Jim Crow. But that Civil Rights Act was passed by Congress. And so if you are now moving toward getting rid of this whole idea of the federal government being able to do things under the Commerce Clause, which they use for the New Deal to get rid of what I call the Lochner era, then you're going back to saying individuals can discriminate. And remember, equal protection says individuals can discriminate. The state can't. So because of that, yeah, I think we headed back to a situation where we're going to say individuals can discriminate, but as long as they want to, and especially if they have a religious belief that goes toward it. And the only thing that would change that, you guys. And it all comes down primarily to elections. I understand, by the way, coalitions win. Individual groups don't. Honestly, I'm always honest, so let me not say honestly, but I understand why Palestinians were mad at Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. Really, it was Joe Biden's policy, not Kamala Harris. It doesn't matter though. You still should have voted for Kamala Harris because you still get a better deal from her than you would from Trump, and that was obvious. That's this whole thing. It's not about whether I like you. It's about who can harm me the worst and who I can deal with. We in Louisiana, this is a Republican-dominated state. If you are a Democrat, you're going to have to deal with the Republicans. And try to get a little bit out of them because you're not going to be able to just force your way to get what you want. That's what it means, guys. Incremental change. Does that scare you, Ms. Stevens?
A little less.
No,
but I appreciate your insight.
It needs to scare you. It should scare you because if you don't get a handle on this, yeah, we really will go back to the 50s. And I am scared of the 50s. I'm also scared of the next person who becomes president. So I think that this is a fundamental thing that we need to make sure that we're on top of. You need to get out, register people. I understand people that that we should back off and you guys voted for this person. That does not mean that we shouldn't be getting everybody we can to vote in the midterm elections. And hey, and I will say this, guys, I am looking for Republicans that I could vote for, but they haven't given me anybody in the last 20 years. I'm an independent. They haven't given me anybody that actually is pragmatist.
I think we have a couple of people in here that maybe have not taken con law yet, but I'm hoping that, hearing Dr. Race talk today is encourage you guys to look forward to con law. And I'll admit, I was kind of scared, Dr. Race, to take con law. And we take it as part-timers. I believe we take it our third year. So
yes.
We've done a decent amount of law school already, whereas some schools I think they take it right off the jump, right? But I really liked it, and I like history, and I can tell you like history. So, and a lot of us like history. So it's a lot better to hear these conversations than maybe going over contracts or torts or something. And I know you teach torts too, but it's just more. You can kind of grasp and feel this a lot more, and it's more relevant, and it's what you see in the news every day. So it was always enjoyed coming to con law class.
Protect the information you get, and remember you are lawyers. So the first thing know yourself. Know your tendencies, know what you tend to believe, because based upon what you tend to believe, it actually makes it easier to fool you. All I got to do is make it a variation on what you believe, and then you're going to accept it, where you should be questioning. Someone says what you want to hear, you need to question it more. Then once you go through it, then you can use it if you've gone through and done the research and say, okay, yes, now I got it. I got these numbers, right? I can use it. But you need to be really careful. The reason Trump has been very successful is because he has a station that people just accept. I assure you that the majority of Republicans believe that our gas prices were lower, and they were actually for about the first 9 months of his thing. They were, gas prices were actually higher than the day he came in office. Yeah, but people, if you hear something over and over again, you will believe it. So you have to protect yourself, you know, as the future leaders. I'm actually past that point. I'm trying to get you guys to go out to be that future leader, right? But you got to make sure, because see, if you cannot question the information you get in, then when it gets challenged by somebody on the other side, then you look like some of the MAGA people look when they're trying to defend what they're doing. And you don't want to be that way. You want to be able to stand up and say, this is it, this is why, and this is what, the reasons why this is or why it isn't. Right. And so this is the essence of what it means to be a lawyer, to be a champion debater. And I wasn't a debater. I'm the son of one and I married one, which means I had to get better.
Well, it's always a pleasure talking, Dr. Race. I really appreciate you giving us your time today. It was very insightful, as always. I encourage, all of our students and our members to keep after the good fight and keep informed with these issues. And I hope they all could take you, Dr. Race, if they haven't. And I'm sure some of us, me and Caleb, have already, maybe a few others.
But
So
one quick thing I want to tell you, because the American
sure.
Constitution Society, when it was started, it actually was started in response to the Federalist Society that used to be here, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I was the faculty sponsor of both the Federal Society, which is very, very conservative, and then a student wanted to start the American Constitution Society in response to that. So keep up the good work, guys, because you guys are all those future. Most politicians are not the front men; it's the people who do the work, and we need a lot more of you. So
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Dr. Race. Everyone give
okay,
Dr. Race a hand. Thank you so much. I appreciate it so much. And yeah, we had a great time, and we'll post a recording if on our page, and everybody will be able to watch it. Those who couldn't make it today will be able to watch it. Got some thank yous coming in,
I
and
appreciate that, guys.
I very much appreciate it. Thanks so much, and I hope all you guys have a great day, and stay after it.
All right, guys,
Thank you, Dr. Race.
take care.
Take care.